Wheelie Race brings some big changes for the Super Cassette Vision. This is the start of their summer 1985 releases. Wheelie Race was released sometime April or May-ish. We've got much more attractive packaging. The box is still the same fold-out with a pocket for the game, but now they actually have art and logos. The boxes no longer scream, "Graphic design is my passion." And Wheelie Race is a pretty big game for the Super Cassette Vision. It's actually a lot like the previous game Nebula, where there's several long, scrolling areas. The concept of Wheelie Race is that you're in a race around the world. And by around the world, I mean you drive through the US, Africa, and then Europe. The choices of stages might seem odd to you, but they were clearly picked because they're the locations of long rally race events. Naturally, your goal in Wheelie Race is to come in first. But more important than that, you just want to finish. As you're driving, the right-hand button accelerates while the left-hand button brakes. And if you want to pull off a wheelie, because this is Wheelie Race, then you press down on the controller. The wheelie winds up being less effective than you might like. It has a little bit more power and acceleration, but not so much more that you'd really notice. And on stages 2 and 3, you can do a wheelie to get over some obstacles in the road. When you're doing a wheelie, you burn a lot more fuel than normal. Your fuel gauge is constantly depleting, and if it runs out, then you lose a life. You recover fuel by pulling into gas stations. Not stopping at them, just pulling into them. And all of the gas stations have signs letting you know that they're coming up and on which side of the road. Your fuel doesn't run down so fast that you have to use the gas stations constantly. You can pass 2 or 3 of them without any major concern. There are lots of cars blocking your path here, and generally speaking, you can bump into them a little bit, but not much. With some cars, you'll just rub paint and back off a little bit, while others will actively try to avoid you if you start pulling into them. Speed is a big factor in those collisions. So if you're going to hit somebody, slam on the brakes, and usually you'll only spin out. The real threat is colliding with terrain on the side of the road. That will cause a wreck and make you lose a life. There are 2 difficulty levels in Wheelie Racer, Amateur and Professional. And as usual, Amateur starts with 8 extra lives, while Professional starts with 4. That said, I actually recommend playing the game on Professional. The top speed of your car on Professional is about 50% faster, so that makes the game a lot harder, but it also feels a lot better. When you come across rocks or logs in the road, if you pull back for a wheelie, you can drive right over them. But you can't steer while doing the wheelie, and you have to be going straight when you start a wheelie. So the control scheme requires that you straighten out your car and then pull back, otherwise you're going to crash. Another obstacle you'll encounter in Africa are swamped roads, and these will just slow you down, while pulling a wheelie will let you power through them a bit faster. Text in the upper left tells you roughly where you're supposed to be in the race, assuming you can interpret the abbreviations. For some reason, the US and Europe map only use 3 letters, while the African map uses 5. If you complete the race, then you get to do it all over again. You just go back to the start. And that's everything there is about Wheelie Race. There's no power-ups or anything like that. As a top-down racer, it's very similar to other games in the genre that were popular at the time. Zippy Race is the obvious one to look at as a comparison, as it's also about a transcontinental rally race where you have to manage your fuel. But in this case, I think as a console game, Wheelie Race is better. Wheelie Racer manages to control pretty well. It gives you good tools to deal with the traffic around you, and it's even possible to memorize the track and car placement so that you can get really good at it. It might not be a game you'd want to play for a long session, but many of these early arcade games we're seeing represented on the Super Cassette Vision weren't designed for that. Wheelie Race might not be a top-tier game, but it is one time where I think at that moment the Super Cassette Vision was coming out on top of the Famicom.